in. Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. When it rains, it pours. Feels like a Friday. Literally since dinner time tonight, we have learned in the Washington Post that the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is White House official number one, who was denied a security clearance last year because of concerns about foreign influence over him, his private business interests, and his personal conduct. After a ruling by career security officials that Mr. Kushner had too many significant disqualifying factors to receive a top-secret clearance, a Trump political appointee nevertheless overruled that determination and gave Jared Kushner the top-secret clearance anyway. Kushner, you might remember, issued a statement in February saying that his security clearance was handled in the regular process. It now seems clear, according to a whistleblower in a position to know, that that statement was absolutely not true. The Post reports tonight that Kushner's top-secret clearance was granted against the recommendation of security officials on May 1st. It was, in fact, initialed by the Trump appointee who overruled security staff. On that same day, also on May 1st, Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, who's married to Mr. Kushner, she was also given her clearance that same day as well. And you at home should look under your chair, because you get a top-secret clearance too. And you get a top-secret clearance. And you get a top-secret clearance. Everybody gets one. No matter the serious disqualifying red flags in your background checks and how many ways actual national security screeners believe that you can't be trusted with the nation's most secret information, you get one anyway. Again, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, being named as White House official number one, previously not described by name in those reports. We're going to have more on that story ahead. We're also going to have more ahead on this major shot across the bow tonight from the Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Richard Neal. Congressman Richard Neal of Massachusetts heads the Ways and Means Committee. Today, he notified the IRS in writing that he is invoking the section of the federal tax code that requires the IRS to show him specific tax returns that he wants to see as chairman of Ways and Means. Chairman Neal is requesting 6 years of President Trump's personal tax returns, starting in 2013, 2 years before he declared his run for the presidency, all the way through to 2018, last year. Congressman Neal has also told the IRS to turn over tax returns for those same years for all of these different Trump business entities. According to background information provided by the Ways and Means Committee, those specific entities, quote, constitute the core of the president's business. The committee says the first 5 entities on that list, quote, control hundreds of other business entities associated with President Trump. So again, we will have more on that story ahead over the course of this evening, including the fact that the IRS, you should understand, they're not being asked for these records. They're not being subpoenaed for these records. They appear to be plainly required by law to hand these tax returns over now that the committee chairman has demanded them. Congressman Neal claims today that the IRS has never before in U.S. history rejected a request for a tax return filed under this section of the tax code. But those demands of the IRS are in and formally worded and formally requested/demanded as of tonight. That one is red hot and brand new. And just as we were digesting that, then we got this. Oh, you don't say. Yeah, who could have seen this coming? The headline in this breaking news report in the New York Times tonight, this is just broken within the last hour and a half. You see the headline there. Some on Mueller's team see their findings as more damaging for Trump than Barr revealed. Oh, who could have seen this coming? You mean to tell me when the newly installed Trump Attorney General decided to sit on the Mueller report and not release it to anyone, not a single page, and instead the White House and congressional Republicans and conservative media tried to claim total vindication for the president in Mueller's report based just on Attorney General Barr's odd, vague characterization of what he says Mueller concluded? which the AG then later said shouldn't even be taken as a summary of what Mueller concluded? You mean to tell me that maybe the Mueller report isn't exactly as exciting and positive and exculpatory for the president as the Trump administration and conservative media and congressional Republicans would have you believe? Really? Who could have seen this coming? Hope you've enjoyed your victory laps. Here's the lead tonight in the New York Times. Quote, some of Robert Mueller's investigators have told associates that Attorney General William P. Barr failed to adequately portray the findings of their inquiry, and that the findings of their inquiry were more troubling for President Trump than Mr. Barr indicated. Citing government officials and others familiar with the simmering frustrations of Mueller's investigators, the Times tonight reports, quote, some members of Mueller's team are concerned that because Mr. Barr created the first public narrative of the special counsel's findings, Americans' views will have hardened about the Mueller report before the investigation's conclusions actually become public. Quote, at stake in the dispute is who shapes the public's initial understanding of one of the most consequential government investigations in American history. Today, of course, congressional Democrats, led by Chairman Jerry Nadler of the House Judiciary Committee, they authorized a subpoena to obtain the entire unredacted report from Mueller's office. They did not send that subpoena to Attorney General Barr today. Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler insisted instead today that he wants to give Attorney General Barr time to change his mind. He basically wants to negotiate with the Attorney General to try to persuade him to release the unredacted report of Mueller's findings to the Judiciary Committee. Attorney General Barr, for his part, appears to be basically ignoring all requests and demands from Congress when it comes to Mueller's report. He insisted in his last letter to the Judiciary Committees that he's going through the report now and cutting out a whole bunch of different kinds of information that he believes Congress shouldn't be allowed to see. He has said that Mueller himself is assisting with this redaction process, although no one quite knows what that means, and that may become a very, very different thing in terms of how we understand this process, given this new reporting from the Times. This report from the Times tonight suggests that Mueller's team, however involved they are in the process from here on out, this report tonight suggests that Mueller's team is not on board with how Attorney General William Barr is handling this. And according to the Times reporting, members of Mueller's team are basically warning people that Attorney General William Barr is trying to publicly sell a version of what he says are Mueller's findings that is not actually a fair representation of what Mueller found, and that happens to be way too kind to President Trump when you compare it with Mueller's actual conclusions. And this new reporting goes right back to that strange initial question of why exactly Barr is behaving the way he is, why it is that Barr decided to provide his purported summary, don't call it a summary, of Mueller's findings in the first place. Nobody expected him to do that. There's nothing in the special counsel regulations that required him to do that. There was no warning or any sort of expectation that he would do that. Why, in fact, did Barr decide to not release anything from Mueller's report and instead to release his own take on what Mueller found? Here's more from the Times report tonight. Quote, the special counsel's investigators had already written multiple summaries of their own report. And some team members believe that Barr should have included more of their material in the 4-page letter he wrote on March 24th, laying out their main conclusions as he characterized them. Mr. Barr, quote, only briefly cited the special counsel's work in his letter. Going on, the Times says that government officials familiar with the investigation and others interviewed declined to flesh out why some of the special counsel's investigators viewed their findings as potentially more damaging for the president than Barr explained. Quote, it was unclear how much discussion Mueller and his investigators had with senior Justice Department officials about how their findings would be made public. So, I mean, this is remarkable, right? What the Times is describing here, remarkably, is criticism, right? What they describe as simmering frustration from Mueller's investigators about the pro-Trump characterization of their findings that Attorney General William Barr made public as his own summary of their work, while he, A, prevented any of the actual report from being made public or even provided to Congress, and B, he apparently prevented even their own written summaries of their own work from becoming public at all. This is totally new. We had no idea that Mueller's team summarized their own findings themselves. They prepared a summary themselves. Barr did not release that summary. He wrote a different one himself, which Mueller's investigators say is wrong. They at least say it is less damaging for President Trump than what their report and their investigation actually found. Now, there's a couple more things here. One is reporting that, I mean, it's all anonymous sources, right? But this is reporting that appears to be sourced from DOJ. I say that because the Times describes its sources for some of this as unnamed persons close to Attorney General Barr's thinking. But those sources are telling reporters at the Times why Barr might have released his own summary that was only sunshine and bluebirds when it came to President Trump, rather than releasing the actual written summary prepared by Mueller's investigators themselves. I have to warn you, this is a little bit rich in terms of the explanation about why Barr did what he did. Quote, Barr has come under criticism for sharing so little from Mueller's report, but according to officials familiar with the Attorney General's thinking, he and his aides limited the details they revealed because they were worried about wading into political territory. Mr. Barr and his advisors expressed concern that if they included derogatory information about Mr. Trump while clearing him, they would face a storm of criticism, like what James Comey endured in the Clinton investigation. Quote, Barr was wary of departing from Justice Department practice not to disclose derogatory details in closing an investigation, according to two government officials familiar with Barr's thinking. They pointed to the decision by James Comey to harshly criticize Hillary Clinton in 2016, while simultaneously announcing that he was recommending no charges against her in the inquiry into her email practices. So according to sources close to Attorney General Barr's thinking, that's what he's thinking. I mean, just imagine you're writing the history chapter about this for people not yet born, right? Here's the thinking. Because the FBI made an announcement of free-floating criticism and derogatory information about presidential candidate Hillary Clinton right before the presidential election, thus helping her opponent Donald Trump win the presidency, now Donald Trump appointees are soberly pledging that when it comes to a sprawling criminal and counterintelligence investigation of Donald Trump as president, the Clinton example is why nothing should be released to the public about Trump whatsoever, not at least if it's negative, only if it's good. Because that's the principle, right, that we're upholding? Here's one last point in this Times story, though. A couple of times, the Times says tonight that they're not exactly sure. They're not reporting here what exactly the objection is from Mueller's team, what the frustration is here from Mueller's team about the distance between what they actually found and the way Barr has characterized their investigation. For example, the Times says explicitly in their report tonight, quote, it was not clear what findings the special counsel's investigators viewed as troubling for Mr. Trump. But clearly, their troubling findings for Mr. Trump are listed in their own report, right? They have written these things down. They are the findings of the Mueller investigation. They're there in the report, which 12 days now we can't see. So the question is, do we get to see what those troubling findings for Mr. Trump are? And who's going to decide? I mean, who's deciding what is getting cut out of Mueller's report? Congress says they get it all unredacted. Well, who's deciding what they're going to try to ship to Congress when they reject Congress's claim that they should get an unredacted report? Who's to decide what goes to the public and what the redactions are? Again, Attorney General Barr says that Mueller, the special counsel, is assisting in the process of deciding what's being redacted from the report before Barr lets it out of his clutches and gives it either to Congress or the public. So Mueller is supposedly helping in this process of, cutting stuff out of his own report, blacking stuff out. Well, according to the Times tonight, Mueller's team, again, prepared their own summaries of what their own findings were. And Barr decided not to release their own written summaries of their own findings and instead substituted his own explanation of what he says they found, which they now take issue with. One of the weirdest things in this whole report tonight, though, is that what the Times is basically saying, according to sources that appear to be in the Justice Department or sources familiar with the Attorney General's thinking, is that when Mueller's team prepared their own summaries of their own findings, they prepared them in such a way that they would be unreleasable, either to Congress or to the public. Why would they do that? Here's what the Times reports. Quote, the special counsel's investigators had already written multiple summaries of their own report, and some team members believed that Mr. Barr should have included more of their material in the 4-page letter he wrote on March 24th, laying out Mueller's main conclusions. However, the special counsel's office never asked Mr. Barr to release the summaries soon after he received the report, a person familiar with the investigation said. Okay? And the Justice Department quickly determined that the summaries contained sensitive information, like classified materials, secret grand jury testimony, and information related to current federal investigations that must remain confidential. That's according to 2 government officials. So this is the part of it that kind of throbs like a fritzing neon sign here. I mean, what the Times is reporting, based on what appears to be current government officials, Justice Department sources, is that Mueller and his team prepared their own summaries of their findings. Mueller's team is angry that those summaries were not released to the public by Barr, and instead he released his own, which was much nicer to Trump. But Mueller is also involved in deciding what can and can't be released from his report. And his summaries were written in such a way that they definitely can't be released to the public or to Congress? I mean, something just doesn't add up here. I will say there is one last implication, though, of this reporting from the Times. When's the last time, over this whole 2-year process, that you remember seeing reporting that sourced to Mueller's investigators? Mueller's investigators say, Mueller's investigators have told. When's the last time you saw reporting like that? You haven't seen reporting like that before. One of the other implications of this reporting tonight is that whatever William Barr is trying to do with Mueller's report, it appears to be rubbing Robert Mueller and his team the wrong way. And for the first time in this whole 2-year process, they appear to be willing to squawk, to make some public noise, to make sure their findings are not abused or mischaracterized or submarined. Maybe there will be now a new voice in this whole process from Mueller and his team themselves. They've been silent throughout this entire process. Now we're starting to hear from them. Joining us now is Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General in the Obama administration. He is the author of the Justice Department regulations that define the Office of Special Counsel. Neil, it's great to have you here tonight. Thanks for joining us on short notice.
Thanks, Rachel.
Let me just ask you, I know you've had a chance to read this Times report. I know you just heard my sort of takeaways from it. Let me ask you what you think is important here and what you think people should understand about this new reporting.
Well, totally clears the president. No, Rachel. It's obviously due to this reporting and other things chose to be a lot more complicated than that. And President Trump said those words and his advisors that the Mueller report clears him totally and the like. And they've got to prove it up now. And last week, Trump said that the report clears him and he wants the public report, he wants the Mueller report to be publicly released. And today he switched tunes in a press conference and said, it shouldn't be released, blah, 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 excuse after excuse. And I think what's really extraordinary about this is, as you were saying just toward the end of your discussion, is we've gone 22 months. We've never heard anything from Team Mueller until tonight. And that just, I think, underscores, that what Barr did in those 2 letters and the games he's been playing are deeply damaging, and the Mueller team is evidently not going to stand for it.
And obviously this is complicated because this is the Times. It's got 3 very impressive reporters bylined on this. They're being very specific about the types of sources that they got here, but their sources are unnamed. I have been wondering all along if the Trump administration, or William Barr specifically, really tried to abuse Mueller's findings, tried to mischaracterize them, tried to submarine them, tried to represent them to the American people or to Congress in a way that Mueller felt was not fair. Would he surface himself as a voice? Or do the special counsel regulations, again, that you wrote, essentially make him so subordinate to the Attorney General at this point in the process that he can't speak for himself, that he's not allowed to essentially advocate for the fair treatment of his own findings?
No, we anticipated this, and that's why the special counsel comes from outside the Justice Department, because once Mueller leaves and the attorneys in his office leave, they have more freedom to speak to Congress on matters of public concern than they might as department employees, and that's one reason why it exists that way. And so the whole idea behind the special counsel regulations, because the Constitution gives the Attorney General the full prosecution power, the idea is to say, Attorney General, if you start messing with the special counsel, then it's got to be public. There's got to be sunlight on that. And the ultimate safeguard is what we're seeing play out tonight, which is if an attorney general starts to abuse the special counsel's report, abuse the special counsel's findings, then the special counsel will come forward and shed sunlight into what might look like a cover-up. And that is what we're starting to see now, something that looks like a cover-up. Now, it might not be. It might be there are totally legitimate reasons for this, but so far Barr has given nobody any reason to think that this is all on the up and up. It looks like he's protecting his guy, and that's why the special counsel regulations and indeed all the investigations of presidents, such as Nixon, such as Clinton, the special prosecutor report comes out because that's what guarantees public confidence in the administration of justice. And it's got to come out now. I mean, it might have been one thing if Barr hadn't wrote those two summary, non-summary, whatever you call it, letters, but Barr did, and he took it on himself to clear President Trump on stuff that Mueller didn't clear him on. And at that point, it starts to look even more like a cover-up and why the report has to be released.
Neil, briefly, one last question on this point about what is going to come out. Obviously, with this authorized subpoena today in the Judiciary Committee, a lot of interesting and actually, I thought, quite substantive discussion in the Judiciary Committee today as to whether or not the Attorney General is within his rights to be personally going through the Mueller report and taking grand jury material out of that, saying that that can't be conveyed to Congress. A lot of discussion in the Judiciary Committee today about the prospect of some entity, maybe the Judiciary Committee itself, some entity going to the court, going to ask for a court order, filing a lawsuit or making a motion with the court so that grand jury material can be conveyed to Congress, much as happened with the Watergate roadmap in 1974 and with other investigations as well. If Barr doesn't want to do that, and he so far hasn't responded to congressional Democrats asking him to make that request of the court, is it possible that Mueller himself, that Mueller's team, as the special counsel's office, could make that sort of a request to the judge that the grand jury information be conveyed to Congress?
Yes, Mueller can do it, or Congress can do it on its own, or even a third party. So Barr is right when he says grand jury material can't be released absent a court order. But he could have sought that court order last Monday, 9 days ago, and he hasn't done it yet. So it does seem like it's not really about grand jury information. It's about something else. It looks like he's trying to protect certain information, perhaps damaging information, from coming out. And if he actually cares about Rule 6C, he could go to court tomorrow and get this thing lifted. That's exactly what happened in Watergate, exactly what happened in the Clinton impeachment, and it should happen here.
Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General. Sir, thank you very much for weighing in tonight, Neil. It's a real pleasure to have you here on a night like this. All right. Up next, the news that on any other night would have led the show for a week. But we'll be right back with that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.